wasn't a chemical imbalance, and it wasn't drugs and alcohol. I think it was much more that I lived an incredibly American life. This idea that if I could just achieve X and Y and Z, that everything would be okay. There's a thing in the book about how when somebody leaps from a burning skyscraper, it's not that they're not afraid of falling anymore, it's that the alternative is so awful. And so then you're invited to consider what could be so awful that leaping to your death would seem like an escape from it. And I don't know if you have any experience of this kind of thing, but it's worse than any kind of physical injury. It may be in the old days what was known as a spiritual crisis. I don't think that we ever change. I'm sure that I still have those same parts of me. I guess I'm trying really hard to find a way not to let them drive.
What is that something else, way down, that's so horrifying to us? Is it the same something that drove Wallace to hang himself? The metaphorical flames that create a terror way beyond falling? If you ask me, the literature of Gnosticism has an answer for that. Gnosticism, in a glib sense, is usually thought of as a counter-religion, the flip side of Christianity, a bunch of Jehovah-bashing heretics scattered throughout history. But it's more properly understood as a metaphysical orientation, or a system of thought. Note 17. The Gnostics were shamans and seers, sort of the indigent, pot-smoking hippies of their time, only far more radical and less inclined than 1960s hippies to sell out and become yuppies. And yes, some Gnostics got high on mushrooms, while others espoused and practiced a second-century version of free love. They claimed to get their spiritual info from direct, out-of-body encounters with divine wisdom, or gnosis, unmediated by a meddlesome, tithe-grasping, authoritarian church. Throughout the past 2,000 years, the Church Fathers have tried to write off the Gnostics as a bunch of self-deluded heretics, or crackpot mystics. But consider this. Gnosticism was, and still is, the most widely suppressed metaphysical belief system in human history. And usually, when authoritarian regimes attempt to suppress information, it's not because that information doesn't contain any truth. It's because the truth it conveys is important to your survival and dangerous to those in power. The Gnostics knew Christianity was an ideological virus designed to perpetuate the master-slave relationship. All that stuff about turning the other cheek, loving your enemies, and doing good to those who hate you, promising you'll be rewarded in heaven after being persecuted and exploited here on earth. They thought that was utter bullshit. Pious propaganda imposed upon the world's people by the same malignantly crazy religious and secular leaders who put their seal of approval on Christianity and then waged a brutal campaign to exterminate all Gnostics and make it seem as if they'd never existed. Return to main text. Simon Magus, a contemporary of Jesus, has been called the father of Gnosticism as well as the father of all heresies. He's the original anarchist, the first person on record in world literature to stand up and say that all the gods are demented maniacs and therefore everything that originates from them is twisted and false. Don't believe their fucking lies, Simon Magus would tell you, were he alive today. After Simon Magus came Thomas the Apostle, Basilides of Alexandria, Valentinus, Mani, and many other Gnostic prophets. There were differences among their various Gnostic sects, but they were united in their belief that only a flawed creator would have created a flawed material universe like the one we inhabit, so steeped in evil and suffering, so rife with the horrors of meat-based existence. Here are some other beliefs they loosely, very loosely, held in common. Gnostic notion number 1. We live in a simulated world, a flawed, fabricated nightmare reality. Our way of life depends on deception, corruption, and utter depravity. Do some research into how the global financial system is dependent on warfare, drugs, debt, and money laundering if you need convincing. Note 18. You can get a feel for the Gnostic take on reality by watching movies like The Truman Show, Dark City, and The Matrix.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad.
The Wallace trilogy of novels by Philip K. Dick will also take you there, as will the HBO TV series Westworld, which is crammed with Gnostic themes. Return to main text. Gnostic notion number 2. We don't belong here. Incarnation in materiality is a form of incarceration for our souls. We're trapped here, ruled over by a crew of cosmic prison wardens, psychic rapists, and swarming hungry ghosts. A persecuting interdimensional mafia known as the Archons. Note 19. Archons is an ancient Greek word that translates as rulers or authorities. For the Gnostics, however, that word has a much more specific meaning. They think of the Archons as minions of the Demiurge, whose secret name is Yaldabaoth. According to Gnostic creation myths, the Archons arose prematurely before the formation of the Earth when Yaldabaoth split off from the Aeon Sophia and jacked off into the cosmos. The Archons engendered by Yaldabaoth's cosmic spunkwad are supposedly non-human and inorganic. They're also intrapsychic, meaning they can get inside our minds. But when they assume physical shape, they look like aborted fetuses or those spindly gray aliens that Whitley Strieber was writing about. Their proper domain is the hebdomad, meaning the other 7 visible planets in our solar system aside from the Earth. But they come to Earth anyway, to fuck with us. I've written about Gnosticism and the Archons in several of my books. I'm now of the opinion that the Archons likely specialize, sort of like malignant egregores or autonomous collective thought forms capable of acting with malicious intent. I suspect there's an Archon of Big Pharma, for instance. An Archon of addictive fast food.
Back off, you sons of bitches! You don't want to see Big Boy's brains splatter, do you?
An Archon of petroleum-based products with a thriving sideline in global warming. An Archon of strife-inducing propaganda. An Archon of attention span splintering technology. An Archon of corporate advertising. And an Archon of international prestige lit, etc. But you don't have to take that specialization idea seriously if it doesn't ring true for you. That one just comes from me. The Gnostics had nothing to do with it. Return to main text. Gnostic notion number 3. Who we are is eternal and immortal. Each of us carries a divine spark that originated from the true God, also known to the Gnostics as the originator, the Godhead, the monad, or the One. When we awaken to our divine spark, we obtain gnosis, spiritual knowledge that can return us to the pleroma, where the true God resides far beyond this material realm. Gnostic notion number 4. The Archons and their demented creator god, the Demiurge, lack divine sparks, and they're super pissed about it. They do everything they can to prevent us from awakening to the divinity within us and then gorge on our resulting pain and misery, like demons, or hidden supernatural, highly intelligent predators that see humans as their rightful prey. So, there you have it. W.H. Auden might have been describing the Archon's malevolence when he wrote in his poem, They, "We realize the woods are deaf and the sky nurses no one. And we are awake, and these, like farmers, have purpose and knowledge, but towards us their hate is directed. We are the barren pastures to which they bring the resentment of outcasts. On us they work out their despair. They wear our weeping as the disgraceful badge of their exile." Would that sort of archontic fuckery qualify as a terror way beyond falling? Maybe, huh? Don't take this the wrong way. The Gnostic sensibility might seem like a downer at first, but in my experience, it's really the best way to keep your sanity in an increasingly insane world. Some modern Gnostics even believe the Archons might be doing us a favor by making life on Earth appear ever more crazy and cartoonishly evil, because by doing so, they'll eventually awaken us to our divine sparks. Quote, "What can one say in favor of the suffering of little creatures in this world?" Unquote. Philip K. Dick wrote just before the end of his wild, traumatized life.
Life matches, drug addiction, grinding sci-fi comedy.
Quote, Nothing except that it will by its nature trigger off revolt or disobedience. which will in turn lead to an abolition of this world and a return to the Godhead, unquote. If you want my opinion, the abolition of this world won't be happening anytime soon. So don't get your hopes up. But let's face it, sometimes the world at large can make you feel like you're trapped inside a bad science fiction novel, or living between the covers of a beyond Infinite Jest-sized book of hysterical realism, with characters whose names are so on the nose that if Philip K. Dick or David Foster Wallace came up with them, you'd wonder if they'd lost their mojo. For example, imagine Alex Trebek intoning the following on a recherche postmodernist version of Jeopardy, as in the DFW short story Little Expressionless Animals. This former NASDAQ chairman and Ponzi scheming investment advisor made off with millions from his greedy, gullible clients.
Who is Bernie Madoff?
This former Hitler youth and Pope Emeritus refused to rat out child molesting Catholic priests while serving as a high-ranking Vatican official.
Who is Cardinal Ratzinger?
This seven-term U.S. congressman and two-time candidate for mayor of New York famously couldn't stop sending underage girls Twitter pics of his weenie.
Who is Anthony Weiner?
This foul-mouthed former White House communications director has a namesake in the notoriously boastful but cowardly clown, or Little Skirmisher of Old World Commedia dell'arte.
Who is Anthony Scaramucci?
Note 20. As reported in The New Yorker by Ryan Lizza on July 27, 2017, Scaramucci called White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, quote,
a fucking
paranoid schizophrenic,
unquote. He also differentiated himself from the apparently either super bendy or monstrously hung White House chief strategist by observing, quote,
I'm not Steve Bannon. I'm not trying to suck my own cock,
unquote. That Italian arch-buffoon Scaramucci used to say similar things right before Harlequin beat him with a stick. With that in mind, it's worth noting that Anthony Scaramucci's tenure as communications director lasted for only 10 days, long enough to get Reince Priebus fired, and presumably for Steve Bannon to experience the brief, salty-sweet rapture of autofellatio. Return to main text. This U.S. president's surname denotes a winning card in a game played by indolent, soft-brained geriatrics, and it's also British slang for a loud, low, wet fart.
Who is Donald Trump?
The Archons can't be outwitted or defeated in this world because they operate outside our fraudulent Newtonian space-time matrix. Note 21. On the other hand, the Gnostics contend that the Archons are inferior to humans because they lack enoia, or creative will, and epinoia, or creative imagination, which means they can only imitate, never create. But they're really good at fooling us. The classic Sethian Gnostic text, the Apocryphon of John, tells us that the Archons delight in deception. Their preferred method is called antimimon, or countermimicry. In other words, they might not be able to create anything new, but they can copy things that already exist and then invert their original meaning or purpose. It's like Orwellian newspeak doublethink mixed up with reality TV. They take something that seems organic and real and turn it into something manufactured and fake. Kind of like those genetically modified seeds from Monsanto that sprout once and then go sterile, so you have to buy them again every year. Or the USA Patriot Act, which eroded the very liberties that the original U.S. patriots fought for during the founding of this country. Voltaire could have been warning us about the Archons when he wrote, quote, anyone who has the power to make you believe absurdities has the power to make you commit injustices, unquote. And Orwell, of course, could have been doing the same when he wrote in 1984 what could be considered the Archon's most famous slogans, quote, war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, unquote. Return to main text. So, as I was saying, the Archons can't be outwitted or defeated in this world because they operate outside our fraudulent Newtonian space-time matrix. They can remember the future and rearrange the past. They can ride certain individuals in the same way that night hags were said to ride folktale-faring peasants. Dick Cheney would be an obvious example, as would George H.W. Bush, Caligula, and Allen Dulles. Such Archon-possessed puppet leaders function as superior slaves directing lesser slaves, i.e. the rest of us, to fulfill the archontic agenda of maximizing pain and emotional violence in all the demiurge's creatures. Hence our kill or be killed Hobbesian meat matrix of perpetual warfare, starving children, loveless marriages, rampant addictions, and everyday incest, rape, and torture. Our school for despair and murder, good old Earth. Were the Archons writing David Foster Wallace? That line of speculation might seem too bizarre to even entertain, but think of it this way. If you intuitively knew that every time you caved into anger, fear, or clinical depression, you were feeding those interdimensional mind parasites known as the Archons, wouldn't it be a lot easier to take a step back from the sad, recursive interior monologues or irrational anxieties that were driving you crazy and say, is this really coming from me? Or does something want me feeling this way so it can feed off me? Becoming an impartial observer of your own negative self-sabotaging thoughts might feel strange at first, but it can be quite helpful once you're willing to consider the possibility that you've been tricked into having those thoughts. If you think of the Archons as psychic tapeworms that will be glutting themselves on a huge injection of food from your suicide, that sudden impulse to go hang yourself on the back patio of your house in Claremont, California might not seem like such a great idea after all. Note 22.
Something that is true, that humor can only come out of something sad, or do you think that is a cliche?
I know that Wittgenstein believed that the most serious and profound problems and questions and issues could be discussed only in the form of jokes. I mean, I know in U.S. lit, there's a tradition from about the 50s and 60s called black humor, which is a very kind of sardonic, sad type of humor. I'm grasping for something interesting to say in response. I think probably sometimes it can be, and sometimes it isn't. There are forms of humor that offer escapes from pain, and there are forms of humor that transfigure pain.
I identify with David Foster Wallace to such a degree that I can't help thinking that he might have been happier, or at least more determined to stick around, if he'd embarked on a deep exploration of Gnosticism augmented by Jungian psychoanalysis. It worked for me. It's the overthinking writer's way out of severe depression, intellectually stimulating enough to make life interesting without playing side effect roulette with random psychopharmaceuticals, which, if you're lucky, will only bludgeon you into a bovine stupor, or make you so limp-dicked that you'll experience the true meaning of Kurt Cobain's Smells Like Teen Spirit refrain about his libido and a mosquito. Judging by the writing he left behind, DFW chose not to go the Gnostic Jungian route. Instead, he had some weird ideas about achieving satori via excruciating boredom, which obviously didn't pan out. He did, however, use the word demiurge in The Broom of the System, and he'd circled Gnosticism in his dictionary, along with
Acephalus,
Osiris,
Recrudescence,
and
Gland's penis,
among others. So I'm assuming he was at least familiar with the ideas of that loose collective of cognitive dissidents known as the Gnostics. But I wonder if he knew that the town he chose to die in was, in a sense, ground zero for the Gnostic revival in the West. Two books are generally credited with the resurgence of interest in Gnosticism among English-speaking people in modern times: the Nag Hammadi Library in English, published in 1977, and The Gnostic Gospels by Elaine Pagels, published in 1979. Pagels couldn't have written her best-selling book without the 10 years of work put in by a team of translators and editors on the Nag Hammadi Library, a treasure trove of mostly Gnostic codices, written in Coptic, that had been found inside a 4th century earthenware vessel uncovered by two brothers digging for fertilizer in the sands of Egypt in 1945. Those 13 codices, with their papyrus pages, numbered and bound, are now considered the world's earliest extant examples of books. Some Sumerian cuneiform tablets are thought to be older, of course, but we're talking about hunks of dried clay there, not books. And where, you might ask, did this heroic feat of Coptic Gnostic translation take place? Within the Institute for Antiquity and Christianity at the Claremont Graduate University, a member of Claremont Colleges, which includes Pomona College, where David Foster Wallace had been teaching until he decided to leave Claremont and, quote, good old Earth, unquote. For? Footnote to the footnote. Good old Earth is a phrase found in Wallace's literary career debut, The Planet Trilithon as it stands in relation to The Bad Thing, a story that ends, like the paragraph above, and like The Broom of the System, without the final word. I suspect Wallace might have found that sense of circularity satisfying when applied to the story of his own life's end, although it may be a literary trick he outgrew.
The company store, the paradigm of absolute control. And that's why we're just out here doing simple things, pointing out that we're meant to be in nature and be natural, and this is where we find the source that God made to transcend the New World Order. And that's why they want to try to keep us out of it.
I'm angry. I've had enough of these people. They're a bunch of Christian murderers, scum. They're on giant death factories, keeping babies alive and selling their body parts. What more do you need to know about these people? I go out and face these scum. They literally crawl out from under rocks. They have green looking skin and they run around screaming, we love Satan, we wanna eat babies. I have them on video. Hillary's in the creepy weird sick stuff, man. She sleeps in the same room with that creepy weird woman whose mother wears a hood over her head. What the hell? That woman number one is ugly. Imagine how bad she smells, man. I'm told her and Obama just stink. Obama and Hillary both smell like sulfur. Literal vampire pot belly goblins are hobbling round coming after us. My spirit gets close to that evil and I feel it go. We're such self-centered crap. We don't even notice hell itself rising up against us. Millions of pointed people of the very worst type, and I'm so pissed. We're gonna stab your daughter at the mall. We're gonna stab your wife, your son. We're gonna stab you with a butcher knife, and then the police chief is gonna say, we love our Somalis, we love our Muslims. Oh, they're so good, oh, they're so sweet.
According to Plato and some of the philosophers that came after him, like the Neoplatonists and the Gnostics, we arrive on earth with two souls, an immortal soul that seeks union with our divine spirit or true self, and a mortal soul that identifies with the false self and its attachments to the material world. The Gnostics further elaborated that the true God had given us our rational immortal soul, or pneuma, while the demiurge, aka Yahweh, aka Yaldabaoth, aka Saklas, was responsible for our sensuous, irrational mortal soul, or psyche. The mortal soul is, quote, subject to terrible and irresistible affections, tethered like a beast untamed in the belly, unquote. Note 23. That's a quote from Chalcidius's translation of Plato's Timaeus, which I discovered via my reading of Nick Tosh's In the Hand of Dante. That's the beautiful thing about reading. You never know exactly where a good author will take you, but you're always sure to learn something new along the way. Return to main text. If we've become enlightened during our time on earth, when we die, we'll shed our mortal soul so that our immortal soul can merge with our true self, and each true self is a ray of divine light emanating from the One, the true God. So in that sense, we're all gods serving time on this prison planet where we ultimately don't belong. Infinite Jest is all about those terrible and irresistible affections tugging on sensuous, irrational psyches. I'm not the first person to come to that conclusion, of course. After all, the central conceit of DFW's magnum opus is that right before the suicidal patriarch, James O. Incandenza, irradiated his brains in a microwave oven, he made an avant-garde art film, the eponymous Infinite Jest, that was so impossibly enthralling, so lethally entertaining, that it robbed viewers of every desire except to keep watching it in a zombie-like stupor until they shit themselves and died from dehydration. So yeah, substitute words like addictions or distractions for, quote, terrible and irresistible affections, unquote, and you'll find that a lot of people arrived at the same conclusion. Anyway. Need proof? Check out For the Love of Ryan on YouTube, a geeky book reviewer who shines his geeky brilliance on this topic about midway through his video disquisition on Infinite Jest.
Okay, so for those of you who want the takeaway point, what's the thesis? For me, it's about this itch. Though itch seems to be less accurate than just a constant and constantly annoying metaphorical buzzing sound at the back of your conscience telling you that nothing is alright, that you are not alright, and the world is not alright, and we should be running around screaming our truest selves to the stars and seeking other people in this vast darkness. And, of course, our response to this itch, to this buzzing sound, that instead of running around and screaming our vulnerabilities and setting them in front of other humans, we are instead seeking out distractions, and not just distractions, but distractions that have become so large that they consume us. Entertainment in the form of TV or movies or sporting events if you're the one watching them, or drugs, which will let you forget yourself and or your problems for at least a little while, or celebrity status, your belief that you as a person are worth worshipping on some level. The thesis of Infinite Jest, in my opinion at least, is about this itch, this feeling that maybe the world is not okay, and what we can do to scratch that itch or face it in a non-harmful way.
Toward the end of his 5-day interview with David Lipsky back in 1996, David Foster Wallace said pretty much the same thing in a different way. Quote, I think the reason people behave in an ugly manner is that it's really scary to be alive and to be human, and people are really, really afraid. Fear is the basic condition, and there are all kinds of reasons for why we're so afraid. But the fact of the matter is that the job that we're here to do is to learn how to live in a way that we're not terrified all the time, and not in a position of using all kinds of different things, and using people to keep that kind of terror at bay. For me, as an American male, the face I'd put on the terror is the dawning realization that nothing's enough, you know? That no pleasure is enough, that no achievement is enough. That there's a kind of queer dissatisfaction or emptiness at the core of the self that is unassuageable by outside stuff, and that our particular challenge is that there's never been more and better stuff coming from the outside that seems temporarily to sort of fill the hole. Personally, I believe if it's assuageable in any way, it's by internal means. I think those internal means have to be earned and developed, and it has something to do with, the pop psych phrase is loving yourself, end quote. Loving yourself, in the end, might be an inadequate response to existential terror if we're to judge by David Foster Wallace's suicide. Though, who knows? Maybe DFW thought that ending his life on Earth was the very best gift he could give to his true self. Does the pop psych phrase, loving yourself, equate to the much balder exhortation to be selfish, in your mind too? Or is that just my warped way of thinking? Selfishness is what got us into this mess in the first place, if you ask me. I tend to think of this world as a sort of spiritual rehab center or planetary aversion therapy clinic, where addicts to anything corporeal are quarantined until they're ready to return to the divine realms, free of their materialist junkie habits. I'm talking about a birth-to-death boot camp for substance abusers in the widest possible sense of that term. And I'm making an assumption here that it's done for the addict's own good, so they won't wreak havoc as spiritual beings. Note 24. Although, let's not rule out the possibility that artificially created substance abuse problems might just be crude weapons in the archontic arsenal for fucking with us. Return to main text. You can see my point, I hope. Think about it. When we're incarnated/incarcerated on this planet, we can indulge in just about any vice imaginable. We can eat the corpses of other creatures. For speed and convenience, there's a drive-thru line at your local Taco Bell or Wendy's. We can even boil those creatures alive for our gustatory pleasure.
As DFW reminded us in Consider the Lobster.
If we're old men, we can load up on Viagra for fierce erections and hunch away at MILFs and whores until we're well into our 80s. Or, if we're young and broke, we can spend all day masturbating like fiends to free internet porn.
Soon to be supplanted by virtual reality porn and Android fuck machines, with free same-day shipping from Amazon.
We can become alcoholics in really spectacular ways and stay shit-faced for upwards of 35 years.
Just ask the ghosts of Malcolm Lowry and Charles Bukowski.
If alcohol doesn't do it for us, we can join the legion of oral narcotics addicts like Don Gately and company.
Drug overdoses are now the leading cause of death among Americans under 50.
We can even molest children, as thousands of Catholic priests can attest.
Along with the ghosts of Errol Flynn and Jimmy Savile.
No matter what level of depravity we might aspire to, no vice will be denied us if we're really determined to experience it. But every experience comes at a price that gets progressively steeper once we get hooked. That's the planetary aversion model clinic in action. Just about anything on Earth that we like too much will end up punishing us in the end.
Kill them with kindness.
That applies even to the things we need to survive, like sunlight,
which can cause skin cancer,
tasty food,
which can make you fat,
and love,
which can break your heart or give you syphilis, gonorrhea, or AIDS if you love without a condom.
Kinda sucks, doesn't it? Don't think you're immune if you're too timid to sin in a really big way. Our clinging to the material world might be the most heinous addiction of all from a spiritual point of view. It's an addiction rarely mentioned, although the Gnostics were wise to it. They didn't want to become martyrs or go around committing suicide en masse like some comic Kahutek writing doomsday cult, but the Gnostics scorned the material world as if it were beneath them. And maybe, just maybe, they were right.